I'm Daphne Lambert, and in this video I'm going to talk with a wheat grower, a miller and artisan bakers to hear what they have to say about the complex issues around one of our staple foods, wheat. Millions have abandoned eating wheat because of the intestinal distress it causes them. And a growing number of people now believe wheat is responsible for almost every health problem, from fat bellies to autism. Bread is now thought by many to be the root of all evil. Yet the alchemy that transforms wheat into bread has created a food that has sustained us for thousands of years. It is true that for some people wheat is a serious problem. 1% of the population have celiac disease, which is an autoimmune reaction that destroys the ability of the gut to absorb nutrients. Celiac disease is caused by the gluten proteins found in wheat, rye, barley and often oats. If you have celiac disease, the treatment is to avoid all grains containing the protein complex gluten. Researchers now agree that wheat can make non-celiac patients sick, but there are competing theories as to the reason why. Around 12 million loaves are baked each day in the UK, the majority made using modern grains and processing methods. For many, these are the two key reasons we experience digestive problems. To understand more about modern grains, I talked to organic farmer David Wilson, who grows cereals. I asked him to explain the difference between the wheat we used to grow and the wheat we grow today.
The grains we used to grow were often genetically quite diverse because they were sort of mixtures. We hadn't really selected specific single varieties. It was just a sort of mixture of what was grown in that locality. The seed was often kept from year to year, and the varieties were very tall. They grew tall because it meant they could outcompete the weeds. And straw was often more valuable as not just as livestock bedding, but thatching, roofing material. Modern varieties have been bred much shorter, often called dwarf or semi-dwarf varieties, so they're probably a quarter or a third of the height. They're bred to take a lot of fertiliser, so they don't go flat. If you're a tall variety and you have a lot of fertiliser, they tend to go flat on the ground, which is difficult to harvest and reduces quality. And obviously they've been bred to produce much more yield.
Do you think there's a difference in the quality of the older varieties of wheat compared to the modern strains?
Certainly in terms of trace element content there are differences, and probably the gluten as well. But there's also the whole topic of mycorrhizal association, which is the plant's rooting ability to form these associations with soil mycorrhiza, which is the intermediary between soil mineral and the root uptake of that mineral, and ultimately the mineral content and trace element content of our food, of our wheat, which we know is really important. If you look at most of the comparisons that tend to be done today, it's just looking at sort of the macronutrients, carbohydrate, protein, etc. But actually we really need to be looking at the sort of more subtle side of soil, plant and human nutrition. I think that's where they really come into their own. Certainly things like the height, for example, of the crop affects its rooting capacity. So tall straw varieties often have bigger roots because it's more of an anchor, etc. And they seem to do better in drought conditions. And there's also the whole thing about everybody growing the same variety throughout the country and this lack of genetic diversity, which means that you can often end up with susceptibilities to diseases like yellow rust, for example, that can be devastating to a crop and reduce yields, whereas if you've got something that's a bit more genetically robust, it's going to cope better.
How easy would it be for us to start growing those older varieties of wheat again?
I don't think it's particularly difficult because there are, although it's on a small scale, there are people that have recognised the value of keeping these old varieties going, and to breed them up and to produce significant amounts of seed wouldn't take too long. But if you look at sort of the multinational companies that control plant breeding, etc., they have quite a big part to play in all of this. And what they want is uniformity in everything. in the crops that we grow, in the food that we sell. Global uniformity is the key, and actually uniformity, if you think about it, is the polar opposite of diversity, and diversity is what we should be striving towards in our soil biomes, in our gut biomes, in the food that we eat, in everything that we do should be about diversity. And that's where these old varieties, I think, tick the box.
Growing heritage varieties of wheat benefits the environment and produces a more nutritious grain. To find out about the best methods of milling to maintain the grain's nutrients, I visited Jean-Marc Albisetti, a paysanne boulanger who embraces the whole journey from seed to loaf. Jean-Marc, like many craft bakers, prefers to use stone ground flour. This method of milling protects the nutrients far better than modern-day fast steel rollers. Jean-Marc mills his own flour, a stone's throw from where he bakes, and he took me to see the mill.
Straight from France. The stone is like hidden in there, the turning stone. The distance between the two stones is kept very precisely apart. We can adjust on the 20th of millimeter between the two stones. Grains goes there, falls into this the sifter.
Yes.
Flour falls down through. Bran goes separately there. So this is a traditional way of milling that's been used for thousands of years. There is just some technologies that's been added. Technology of the balancing the ties that we got in the garage to balance the stone. The second is the bearing that can stand the pressure that is put back down towards the stone. That they didn't have this in the past. You know? But now we can reach a very high level of yield and a very high quality of flour.
Can we see some flour coming through?
Yes, we can start it up. It'll be a bit noisy.
Okay.
So,
No
but slightly, you know, I had it for years in my own house.
Oh, really?
Running. So this flour is 83 to 84% wholemeal. So this is the extraction rate we call. This is almost the maximum you can get without getting the bran. And the germ is in there. It has so many qualities, taste, and highly nutritious. So it's worth cultivating it, worth milling it, and worth baking it, and worth really eating it. If you do the cutting too soon, then the seals.
Jean-Marc is one of a growing band of paysanne boulangers who bake traditional breads using local grown heritage wheat. I asked him what this means to him.
It's the way I care for the grain from the soil to the loaf. It's like you feel yourself as an artist when you're like really on a creation. Each bake is a creation, a new creation.
Today, around 80% of bread production is controlled by a small handful of companies churning out bread laden with additives and enzymes and using a minimal fermentation method known as the Shawley wood bread process. The end product lacks nutrition and digestibility. Change, however, is on the horizon. Bread made with natural ingredients and using traditional long fermentation methods is now being baked up and down the country by small artisan bakeries. Flinthow Bakery outside Lewes in East Sussex is one such bakery, and here I spoke first to the owner, David Bland, and asked what ingredients his bakery used to make loaves.
Stone ground, organic flours as much as possible, no additives of any type, water, which luckily the building I'm in here has its own wells, and sea salt. So 3 ingredients to produce as much types of bread as we can.
I asked David his thoughts on the lack of availability of real bread.
Everyone should be able to access proper bread, call it craft, artisan, whatever. You should be able to eat long fermented bread without any kind of improvers, additives, chemicals. Better with organic flours due to pesticide residue, but generally, lack of chemicals, lack of improvers, and long fermented breads, definitely the way to go.
At Flinthow, I met with head baker Aidan Chapman. He's been an artisan baker for 30 years, many of which were spent at his own acclaimed bakery, the Phoenix, in Dorset. I caught up with him at the beginning of the night shift.
Cool.
Hi Aidan.
Hey Daphne, how are you?
I'm good, and you?
Yeah, very good, thank you.
Can you explain to me the difference between the highly automated Chorley wood method of making bread and the artisan process you use?
So for me, time. I think time is kind of everything. When we look at these wonderful wild yeast sourdough breads we're making here, the journey from feeding on the van to mixing our doughs to finally baking it in the oven could be like a 48-hour journey because we're allowing this dough to ferment. You know, we've realised the longer fermentation our breads have, the easier they are to digest, the much better flavours they have. So we're kind of controlling that time and that journey. The Chorley wood method is kind of shortening down the whole process. Rather than using like low amounts of yeast and the act of fermentation to get the bread to where we need it to be, they're introducing lots of hidden sugars, ascorbic acids, lots of different enzymes which are proteins, literally high salt levels, high fat levels, and literally they're just manipulating the glutens and the flours to get there in about an hour and a half.
How important is it for you to share your knowledge and encourage the growth of small artisan bakeries and home baking?
It's so important. I think literally when I did my apprenticeship all those years ago, 30 years ago, I was trained by guys who had knowledge, you know, literally, and it took a long time to train me. And for me, as an artisan baker working in bakeries, you know, if you don't share your knowledge, your kind of craft will die with you. And I think in the 80s and 90s, we're almost in danger of it happening in this country. But now we're sort of seeing a real healthy rise of youngsters coming back into the trade. They're coming back to use their hands and their minds and their imagination and their passion. And I think that's just generally where it's going right now.
Thanks, Aidan. I'll let you get back to your baking
Oh,
now.
thank you, Daphne. I've got a busy night ahead, so lovely to see you.
Nestled below Hay Bluff, in the border town of Hay-on-Wye, artisan baker Alex Gooch bakes multi-award winning bread and pastries. Alex uses time-honoured baking traditions and is part of the revolution bringing real bread back to our tables. Traditional bakers work long hours. I asked Alex about his working day.
Typical day, you'd say on a Sunday you'd feed the 11 and then about 12 hours later, depending on the time of year, you use that 11 to then make a loaf, and then that process, depending on which loaf it is, could be another 12 hours. For us, our delivery vans, our logistics leave about 4 in the morning, 3 to 4 in the morning. So we have to get everything ready, all the orders done to go for that time. So our kind of end of day, everything done is about kind of 3 a.m. Seems early, but then we're largely a wholesale bakery. So we need to get it to customers who need to use it. So we have to get around a lot of people at the time they need the products, really.
I know provenance is really important to Alex, so I asked him why.
I think it's important for the customers, people who are buying the bread, to know where the ingredients have come from. That's really fundamental for me. I think also having relationships with people that grow it or produce it, but I think it's great to be able to say to someone, yeah, that flour comes from there. You know, we use that salt. You know, we use those olives for this reason, stuff like that. I think it means it separates you from other kind of products where it's all a bit of a mystery.
Yeah.
You know, and that's all part of the big picture, which is it's got to taste nice, got to look nice, but then it's going that next level to actually understand what's made it.
I asked Alex what he finds exciting about baking.
It's really creative. It's always changing. It keeps you interested all the time. There's always different things happening. People who work here, I think they really get a buzz out of that as well. We're always trying new things, but even if you don't try new things, the leaven changes from day to day, the flours you get change from each delivery, and it's just very interesting, really. It's very engaging. Of course, bread in itself and the process, it's incorporating a lot of different senses. So you go through all this work, it's all very interesting, and then you come out with bread, which is just amazing.
We have bred wheat to produce high yields in intensive growing conditions, choosing yield and uniformity over nutrition and taste. Furthermore, we refine and process in ways that are harmful to health. Traditional ways of preparing grains include soaking, sprouting, and long fermentation. These methods decrease harmful compounds, increase digestibility, and maximise the nutrition. If processed in these ways, many people who have experienced digestive problems in the past find they no longer need to avoid wheat and benefit from the nutrients and important fibre wheat brings to the diet. In the UK, wheat is the primary bread-making grain, but the industrial bread we end up with deprives us of a potentially nutritious food. Should we stop eating this kind of bread? Yes, without a doubt. Instead, we should seek out handcrafted breads made using traditional methods that enhance health. Food, the way it's grown and prepared, is the nexus where everything that matters comes together. Our health, vibrant communities, social justice, environment, climate and security. The choices we make every day matter because food shapes us and our world.